The trip had been ordinary until the night got too late. He had been sent out for work to a rural mountain county, the kind of place that seemed to empty out as soon as the sun went down. By the time he started looking for somewhere to stay, the roads were dark, the air had turned cold, and there were not many options left. The motel he found sat a little off the main road, beside a slope of trees in a narrow concrete lot. It looked old, not abandoned, just old enough to feel wrong the moment he saw it. The sign still worked, though one side flickered unevenly. The front office light was on, and from the parking lot, he could already see how dark the rest of the place was. Check-in was quick, too quick. The man at the desk barely looked at him. No small talk, no welcome, no warning, just a key, a room number, and a tired nod toward the stairs. That was the first detail that stayed with him. Not because it was dramatic, because it felt strangely empty. Upstairs, the second-floor hallway felt quieter than it should have. That was what bothered him first. Motels usually had noise somewhere, a television behind a wall, water in old pipes, footsteps, a voice, something. But this place felt hollow. He passed one dark door after another, and the silence only seemed to deepen the farther he went. It did not feel closed for the night. It felt as if the building were holding itself still. A few rooms before his own, he saw a woman standing in the doorway of an open room. She looked older, tired, and completely unreadable. She was cleaning in no real hurry, as if time moved differently in that hallway. He tried making a casual remark about how quiet the place was. At first, she said nothing. Then, in a flat voice that sounded too serious to ignore, she said, "At night, don't walk around this place. Not a joke, not a smile, just a warning." When he asked what she meant, she looked at him and said, "Stay in your room. Lock the door." Then she returned to cleaning, as if that explained everything. By the time he reached his room, he was already trying to explain her away. Maybe she was strange. Maybe the motel had problems with guests at night. Maybe she just liked making people uneasy. Inside, the room was exactly what he expected from a cheap mountain motel. Old curtains, an outdated television, a faint smell of dampness, a bathroom sink that dripped too slowly to ignore, a lock that worked but did not feel solid. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just enough to make the room feel less comfortable than it should have. He tried to settle in. For a while, it worked, but even with the television on, the woman's warning stayed with him. Not because it sounded creepy, because it sounded real. Eventually, the room began to feel different. Not louder, not darker, just more aware. The motel did not feel asleep. It felt as though it were listening. The first strange sound came from somewhere out in the hallway. Slow, uneven, like something being dragged across a hard surface. It lasted only a moment, then stopped. He waited for a simple explanation to follow. Nothing did. A few minutes later it came again, longer this time. Drag, pause, drag. It was not loud. That was part of what made it worse. It sounded controlled, like whatever was making it did not want to be heard too clearly. By then, the woman's warning no longer felt easy to dismiss. The signal on his phone was weak, the hour was late, and the motel no longer felt empty in a normal way. Then came footsteps, not fast, not heavy, just slow movement somewhere in the corridor. After that, there were light taps from farther away, followed by the sound of a door moving somewhere out in the darkness. At that point, the silence between noises started to feel just as bad as the noises themselves. He knew he should have stayed inside. But the longer he listened, the harder that became. Eventually, he opened the door just enough to look into the hallway. It was empty. The lighting was weak and uneven, and the corridor looked colder than it had earlier. Nothing moved, nothing spoke, nothing explained the sounds he had been hearing. So when he stepped outside, it was not because he felt brave. It was because the place already felt wrong enough that staying inside no longer felt much safer. Farther down the hall, one room stood out from the others. It had no visible number, and the area around the knob looked worn in a way that did not match the rest of the building. It was the kind of detail most people would miss. But in that hallway at that hour, it felt impossible not to notice. He stopped several feet away and listened. For a second, he thought he heard something from inside. Something slight. Something almost there. Then the silence closed over it again. That was when he realized he was not alone in the hallway after all. When he turned, The cleaning woman was standing farther back in the corridor, half in shadow, watching him. He had not heard her approach. That was what unsettled him most. Not the fact that she was there, the fact that she seemed to belong there in a way he did not. She looked at him without surprise and said, "I told you not to walk around at night." When he asked about the room, she did not answer directly. She only repeated the one thing that mattered. "Go back to your room. Lock your door." Back inside, the room no longer felt like a place to sleep. It felt like the only thin barrier between him and something he did not understand. He checked the lock again, then the bathroom, then the window, then his phone. The signal had dropped even more. Even the idea of calling the front desk felt pointless now. The whole building felt cut off from anything normal. So he sat and listened, waiting for the night to decide what came next. What came next was closer, very close. A soft sound just outside the door, then something brushed lightly across the wood. Not a knock, not quite a scratch, just a slow contact, faint enough to make him question it for a second. Then it came again, longer this time, as if something outside were tracing the surface of the door without any urgency at all. That was when the room stopped feeling private. It felt occupied from both sides. Then the handle moved, only slightly, just enough to feel intentional. It was not the kind of movement that came from someone trying to force their way in. It felt more controlled than that, more careful, like something outside wanted to know whether the door would give without effort. Then the handle returned to place. After that, the dragging sound came back again, closer than ever. And when it stopped directly outside his room, he no longer had to guess whether the warning had meant anything. It had. Then came 3 knocks. Soft, evenly spaced, too deliberate to be random. He said nothing. He did not move. A few seconds later, the handle lowered again, a little farther this time, before easing back into place. Then more silence. And after that, the dragging sound began to move away, slowly disappearing back into the hallway. That should have felt like relief. It did not. It felt like being spared. Sure, for a while, he thought about leaving, but the darkness outside felt just as hostile as the building around him. The parking lot looked swallowed by shadow. The trees beyond it looked black and endless. So he stayed where he was, lights off, television off, listening. The rest of the night passed that way, in silence, broken only by the occasional reminder that he was not the only thing awake in that motel. By the time the first gray light of morning touched the curtain, the place felt ordinary again, not safe, just emptied out. In daylight, the hallway looked harmless. The woman was gone, no cart, no bucket, no sign that anyone had been cleaning rooms during the night. Downstairs, the front office was open, but the desk was unattended. No one answered when he called out. So he left the key, took his bag, and walked out. By the time he reached his car, he had almost convinced himself the whole night had been some ugly combination of exhaustion, isolation, and a bad place to sleep. Almost. Then he noticed the camera above the office entrance. Later that afternoon, once he had put enough distance between himself and the motel to think clearly, he called back and asked about the woman on the second floor. There was a long pause. Then the man on the phone said they had no night cleaning staff. He explained again. Older woman, cold expression, cleaning one of the rooms upstairs, warning him not to leave his room. Another pause. Then came the part that stayed with him. The motel camera had shown him checking in. It had shown him going upstairs. It had shown him leaving in the morning. But no one matching that woman had appeared in the lobby, on the stairs, or near the office at any point that night. He never stayed in that county again. And years later, what still stayed with him was not the dragging sound, not the brushing at the door, not even the handle moving in the middle of the night. It was the woman. Because if she had been real, then someone in that motel knew exactly what happened in that hallway after dark. And if she had not been real, then something else had warned him for a reason.